CNN went on the air in 1980 and scared the devil out of the networks. And their fear was that if people wanted news 24 hours a day, by golly, the broadcast networks had better figure out a way to give it to them before it lost its entire audience to CNN. At that time, there really was nothing on. Most of the three networks, they went to black for the middle of the night, you know. There was nothing on. It's sign off. Play the Star Spangled Banner, show the flag, sign off till the following morning. So they had come up with a show at NBC. Each of the networks came up with a late night, or in CBS's case, all night show, 4-hour show. And NBC's entry was a show called NBC News Overnight. And Lloyd and I were to write and host that. And Herb Dudnick was the original producer of the show. Reuven was the founding father, and it was really, the inmates got to run the asylum. It really was. We got to put on the show that we'd always wanted to, the news show that those of us who reported the news always had wanted to put on, for the main reason being that all our employers were old and asleep at that time of night. And VCRs weren't that common then. So they didn't see us. They really didn't see us. And we got to make the stories run longer. We got to cover. We didn't have money to send crews out to cover. So we would cover, say, for example, the Senate hearings on the new Secretary of State because we got a lot of foreign coverage for free, by showing how the 4 major NATO allies covered the United States hearings for the new Secretary of State, which was a great idea because it gave you 2 streams of information. Not only what was going on in the U.S. Senate, but what the major U.S. allies thought of what was going on in the U.S. Senate. And we would go around and I would talk to editors at local stations all around the country, video editors. And I would tell them, take your outtakes, take things, put together pieces for us, cut them to music, take chances, do odd things. And then we would tell the NBC reporters, we would say, look, we know that nightly news cut your story to 1:30 because they cut everybody's story down to 1:30. And we know that the Today Show only wanted 2 minutes, but they only want the lighthearted part of your story. We'll take what you think the story should have been on the air. But we can't pay you the extra to stay and cut it. You have to want to do it. Well, they all wanted to do it because they all wanted to prove to Today Show and Nightly how it should have been done. So they'd stay. And we would get, as Herbie said, he said, out of 5 stories, 2 will be okay, 1 will be so-so, 2 will be pretty good, and 1 will be terrific. And that turned out to be true. I remember a story that Andrea Mitchell did that I'm not sure you could get on the air now. This was when Reagan was president. And it was a story about the fact that Reagan was the photo op president. And why not? After all, he had been an actor. And it was picture after picture of, and we explained that a photo op was was a lack of opportunity to do anything but take a photograph. And she said lines, riding a tractor in Iowa is a lot easier than explaining the deficit. And she had somebody else would do a picture on the fact that Ronald Reagan loved to salute because he knew how from the movies, and that he saluted everyone. And they had collected footage of him saluting everyone in the world. And I, people have said, oh, you must be anti-Reagan. No, we didn't have a show when Carter was on the air. When Carter was president. It was just that simple. Reagan was president while Overnight was on the air. It wasn't Reagan we were making fun of or taking shots at or questioning. It was power, which always deserves being questioned. Always. That if there's one job we're there to do, it's to question power and those in power. But Overnight was just a chance for everybody to do their best without the politics that goes on in the average newsroom. And for some reason, it connected, and we got, I've always referred to it as that we had a cult following, because the cult is when you're not big enough to make a minority. We had such press, you wouldn't believe. I mean, if as many people had seen the show as wrote about it, I think we'd still be on the air. But a part of our problem was they had no way then to rate anything after 11:30 at night. There literally was no mechanism for the ratings for anything after 11. So there was no way to rate college dorms, hotels, hospitals, any place where people might gather. And the home ratings all shut off at 11:30 because TV did. The Nielsen boxes, they just all went silent, which was a shame. It was a remarkable opportunity, and I'll never get another one like it, to say pretty much whatever I wanted to say within the bounds of good journalism, and the FCC. And the rules of good journalism. We were not Fox. We did not call ourselves fair and balanced we did not pretend to be news while being something else. We were not MSNBC in that sense either. We were the news, and we did an essay at the end of the show, and we alternated each night on who did that essay, and that was clearly a thought piece. But that was clearly a separate thing from the rest of the show. And we figured the audience was smart enough to figure out that if you start by saying, I think, that what follows is not news, it's your thoughts. And you're not trying to pass it off as a news story. My goodness, how I do go on about overnight. And when it was canceled, things got even stranger. People began to send letters like crazy to NBC. They sent money. Dollar bills, checks. They said there was a Save Overnight campaign. We would see news stories there was a strike in Boston, and they were throwing a guy in the paddy wagon, and he's screaming, down with the scabs, up with the union, save overnight. And we would see these Save Overnight buttons on the White House correspondents of other networks. And there were candlelight vigils at RCA, it was RCA then. And then GE and now Comcast, at 30 Rock. Let's call it 30 Rock. There were candlelight vigils. It was really crazy. But corporations never blush. The show went off the air anyway.